I saw my daughter slip a small packet over my soup, like she thought my eyes were already gone. The candle made her smile look softer than it really was, and I could feel something sharp hiding underneath it. I did not ask what she dropped into my bowl, because I was afraid of the answer. I waited until she turned her back, and I switched our plates with hands that stayed calm, even while my heart tried to run away. When she sat down again, she lifted her spoon and tasted the soup that was meant for me, and I watched her face like my life depended on it. Because it did. Thank you for watching, it means more than you know. And before I go any further, I would love it if you would tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because when you sit with a story like this, it helps to feel like I am not sitting alone with it. My name is Bertha, and I live here in Texas, in a little house that has seen more seasons than I can count. The kind of house that holds on to memories in the quiet corners, even when the people inside it try to pretend everything is fine. That night, I kept my face steady as she ate, and I remember noticing the way the candlelight caught the curve of her cheek, like she was still the same girl I once tucked into bed, but nothing about the room felt gentle anymore. Not the air, not the silence, not even the way the spoon clinked against the bowl. I have lived long enough to understand that danger does not always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes dressed up as kindness, served warm, and placed right in front of you with a smile that is just a little too practiced. I could feel my own pulse in my fingertips, and I held them together under the table, not praying exactly, but trying to keep my thoughts from spilling out of me, because if I let my fear show, even for a second, I did not know what she might do next. I watched her swallow, and she nodded like the taste pleased her, like this was just another peaceful dinner between a mother and her daughter. And for a moment, I almost wondered if I had imagined it, if my eyes had played tricks on me the way people assume old eyes will. But then she paused, just a small pause, and her gaze flickered to my face, not with warmth, not with love, but with a quick, measuring look, as if she were checking for something, as if she were waiting for my body to do what she expected it to do. In that instant, I felt something inside me harden, not into anger, but into clarity. Because when someone you love watches you like that, with calculation instead of care, you stop telling yourself comforting stories and you start listening to the truth. I kept my breathing slow, and I let my eyes soften, and I gave her nothing. Because I knew the most dangerous thing I could do at that table was show her that I understood. The soup sat warm in my stomach only because it was the bowl meant for her. And I could not stop thinking about the bowl that would have been in my hands, the one she had touched, the one she had changed, and how close I had come to taking that first spoonful without ever knowing I was being tested. My mind raced through reasons, and none of them were good, because no decent reason exists for a daughter to put a strange substance into her mother's meal. And still, I searched for one. The way a mother will. The way we keep trying to save our daughters in our thoughts, even when they are standing right in front of us, doing something that cannot be unseen. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself to stay alive, and I watched her carefully, waiting for the moment when whatever she had sprinkled into that soup would make itself known. I wish I could tell you I was surprised, but the truth is, the weeks leading up to that dinner had been heavy, like the air before a storm that refuses to break. She had been irritated by everything, the sound of my walker on the floor, the way I asked the same question twice, the fact that I still wanted my own mail opened in my own hands, and not placed in front of me already torn, already sorted, already decided. Little things turned into sharp words, and sharp words turned into silence, and silence is where you start noticing what love used to sound like. I had raised her to be strong. But somewhere along the way, strength in her became control, and control became a kind of coldness I did not recognize, even though I was looking right at it. So as I watched her sitting there, waiting for me to react to a soup I never tasted, I felt two pains at once. One was fear in my chest, and the other was grief. Because I knew, deep down, that something in our home had already been poisoned long before that bowl ever touched the table. That evening had started with her voice sounding almost too gentle, the way someone speaks when they want to be forgiven before they have earned it. She said she was tired of the arguing, tired of the stress, and she wanted us to have one quiet meal like we used to. And I remember how my heart leaned toward that hope. Because hope is stubborn in a mother. It keeps showing up even when it has been disappointed 1,000 times. She moved around the kitchen with purpose. Wiping the counters twice, lining up the spoons just so, even straightening the napkins like this dinner was a performance. And I sat there watching her hands, thinking about all the times those same hands had reached for mine when she was younger and frightened. But every now and then she would glance at me. Not the way you glance at someone you love, but the way you check a clock, the way you count down to something. And each time she did it, my stomach tightened like it was warning me before my mind caught up. When she set the bowls down, she placed mine closer than usual, almost nudging it toward me. And she asked if I needed anything, water, crackers, my medicine, and the way she said medicine made my skin prickle, because it was said too quickly, too carefully, like it had been practiced. I told her I was fine, and I kept my voice light, and I watched her turn back toward the counter, because something in me, older than fear and stronger than politeness, told me to watch her when she thought I was not watching. And then it happened. The smallest movement, the fastest flick of her wrist, the soft crinkle of a packet, and that pinch dropping into the broth like a secret. And I understood in one cold second that this was not a peace dinner at all. It was a test, and I was the one meant to fail it. In that moment, my thoughts did not rush the way you might expect. They slowed down, each one stepping carefully behind the other, because panic would have betrayed me faster than any word. I told myself not to move, not to stare, not to let my face ask the questions my heart was already screaming. And I focused instead on the sound of her breathing, the rhythm of the house, the steady tick of the clock that had outlived every argument we ever had. I wondered how long she had planned this, how many times she had stood in this same kitchen imagining an ending that did not include my voice anymore, and the weight of that thought pressed down on me harder than fear ever could. Still, I sat there quiet and present, because whatever she believed about me, whatever she had decided I was no longer capable of, she had forgotten one thing. I had lived long enough to recognize when love leaves a room and something darker takes its place. She walked over to the sink as if nothing had happened, turning on the water and letting it run too long, and I could tell from the stiffness in her shoulders that she was waiting for something. Maybe for my spoon to lift, maybe for my eyes to flutter, maybe for my body to do what she hoped it would do. That was when I made my choice. Not loudly, not bravely, in the way stories like to pretend, but quietly, with a kind of determination that comes when you realize you are standing at the edge of something you may not return from. I slid my hands forward, slow enough to seem normal. And I felt the warmth of the bowls against my fingertips as I switched them, careful not to clink too hard, careful not to breathe too sharp, careful not to make the kind of mistake that cannot be taken back. When she turned around and came back to the table, she did not notice a thing. And that hurt in a way I cannot fully explain, because it meant she truly believed I was too old to see, too old to think, too old to protect myself. And she sat down smiling like she had already won. She lifted her glass and said, "To peace, Mom," and I answered with a small nod, because my throat had tightened up so much that words felt dangerous. The candle flame trembled between us. And for a second I could not stop my mind from running backward through all the peaceful dinners we used to have, when her laughter was real, and my only worry was whether she had eaten enough. Then she picked up her spoon, and I watched the metal rise, watched it hover, watched her eyes flick to my face again. And it was such a quick look, but it carried the weight of intention, like she was listening for silence inside me. She took that first sip, swallowed, and smiled like the taste pleased her. And my heart kept beating in a steady, stubborn way, because I knew the next few minutes would decide everything, not just what she had done, but what kind of person she had become. I sat as still as I could, hands folded, breath measured, and I waited. Because when you are an old woman, and you finally understand you are being treated like something disposable, you do not waste time pretending you did not see the truth. At first, nothing happened, and that almost made it worse. Because hope has a way of trying to crawl back into your chest when you are not paying attention. She took another spoonful, then another, and she started talking about ordinary things: the weather, the price of groceries, a neighbor's dog that kept barking, like she was trying to wrap the whole night in normal conversation so my mind would stop reaching for the truth. I answered softly, just enough to keep her comfortable. And I kept my eyes on her hands, the way her fingers held the spoon, the way her knuckles stayed a little too tight, the way she did not relax, not even when she smiled. Then I noticed the first change. So small that someone who did not know her would have missed it. A brief pause in the middle of a sentence, like her thoughts had stumbled over something her body was feeling. She blinked a few times and pressed her lips together, and she tried to cover it by sipping again, as if swallowing could push the sensation back down where it belonged. Her eyes went a little glassy, and a faint shine appeared on her forehead, the kind that does not come from a warm room, but from a sudden effort to stay in control. I felt a cold sadness spread through me, because I knew it was working. Whatever she had used, it was making itself known inside her, and she was learning, in real time, what she had been willing to put into me. She set the spoon down for a second and laughed. But the laugh sounded thin, like it was made of paper, and she reached for her water with a hand that shook just enough to spill a few drops onto the table. I did not point it out, I did not accuse her. I just watched, breathing slowly, because I needed her to keep showing me the truth with her own face, and I needed my mind to stay clear enough to do what came next. She tried to keep talking, but the words began to slip, not in a loud way, just enough that I could hear the strain behind them, like she had to reach farther inside herself for each sentence. Her shoulders sagged, and she rubbed at her stomach as if the warmth of her palm could calm what was turning inside her. And I could see the confusion creeping in, because she had expected me to be the one struggling, not her. When she stood up, the chair legs scraped too hard against the floor, and she grabbed the edge of the table for balance. Then she looked at me with a frightened kind of anger. The kind people feel when their own plan turns against them. "I don't feel so good," she mumbled, and she tried to walk it off like pride could steady her knees, but her steps were uneven, drifting toward the hallway like her body had forgotten how our home was shaped. I followed at a distance, not rushing, not grabbing her, because I did not know yet how deep it would go. I only knew it was happening, and I had to be ready for whatever came after. In the bathroom doorway, she braced both hands on the sink, breathing fast, and the sound of the running water filled the house like a curtain, hiding the truth from anyone outside these walls. My fingers were already on my phone, and as I listened to her struggle to stay upright, a strange thing happened inside me. Fear turned into a kind of calm purpose, because no matter what she had intended for me, I was not going to let that night end in silence. I stepped back into the hallway and called 911, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, because when your life is on the line, you learn how to speak like you are already safe, even when you are not. The sirens felt loud even before I heard them, like my body recognized help was coming before my ears did. And when the door finally opened, the house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. They moved quickly but gently, asking her questions she struggled to answer. And when one of them asked what she had eaten, my mouth opened before my heart could stop it. I told them exactly what I saw: the packet, the pinch, the switch, and I did not soften my words or dress them in excuses, because at that point, the truth mattered more than my fear of what it would mean. They listened without judgment, collected the bowl, checked the trash, and when they found what was left of that packet, I felt something heavy lift from my chest, because I knew I was no longer alone in knowing what had happened. As they wheeled her out, she looked back at me, not angry, not ashamed, just startled, like she had finally realized that the quiet woman at the table was not as powerless as she had believed. At the hospital, everything smelled like disinfectant and worry, and the bright lights made it hard to tell what time it was, but I could tell time by the way my heart kept beating, slow, steady, refusing to give in. They brought her into a room behind a curtain, hooked her up to machines that beeped like they were counting down seconds, and I sat in a plastic chair with my hands folded in my lap, staring at my own knuckles. Because looking at her face felt like looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's features. A nurse asked me questions in a careful voice, what she took regularly, what I took, whether there had been an accident in the kitchen. And I answered plainly, because I knew how easily truth can get lost when people start trying to protect feelings. When the doctor returned, his expression was the kind that tries to stay professional, but still carries shock. And he explained that the tests showed a strong sedative in her system. Not something that gets into soup by mistake, not something you confuse with salt or pepper, not something you add unless you are trying to make a body slow down. He said the dose was heavy enough that, for someone my age, it could have meant losing balance, falling, breaking a hip, hitting my head, or slipping into a sleep deep enough that no one would notice until it was too late. And as he spoke, I felt my stomach turn, not from nausea, but from the cold understanding of how easily a life can be explained away. I looked through the glass at her lying there, breathing but drained, and I realized she had not just gambled with my safety, she had gambled with the story that would be told after. The story people might have believed. The one where an old woman simply had an accident and everyone sighs sadly and then moves on. A little later, a detective arrived, polite and quiet, not the kind you see on television, just a tired man with kind eyes and a notebook, and he asked me to tell him everything from the beginning, so I did. Every detail, every glance, every sound, because details are what keep truth from being buried. When I finished, he held his pen still for a moment and looked at me like he was weighing something heavier than paperwork, and then he asked softly if I wanted to press charges against my own daughter. And I swear to you, my whole chest ached at the way those words sounded out loud. I sat there feeling the years of motherhood pile up inside me, the scraped knees I kissed, the nights I stayed awake with fevered little hands in mine, the lunches I packed, and I understood that loving someone does not always protect you from what they are capable of. My voice shook, but I did not look away, and I told him I wanted the truth on record. I wanted it known that if anything happened to me, it would not be called an accident, because I had seen too much in my life to let my own ending be written by someone else's lies. After that, things moved in ways I never expected. Quiet steps, taken by people whose job it is to notice danger, even when it wears a familiar face. There were evaluations, long conversations behind closed doors, and decisions made that did not ask for my permission as much as they offered me protection. I was told she could no longer handle my medications or touch my finances, and hearing that out loud felt like admitting defeat and relief at the same time. A social worker walked through my home with careful eyes, pointing out what needed to change so I could stay safe where I belonged. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone was standing beside me instead of over me. Later, a lawyer helped me put words on paper that made my wishes clear, firm lines drawn where trust had quietly disappeared. And as my signature dried, I understood that protecting myself did not mean I had stopped loving her. It only meant I had finally chosen to live. When I came back home, the house felt the same. But I did not. Because once you see what someone is willing to do, you cannot fold that side away and go back to the way you were. I changed what I had to change. Locks, passwords, paperwork. And I learned to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own life, because age is not a weakness. It is proof that you have survived things other people never even imagine. Some nights I still sit at that table and remember the candle, the soup, the quiet smile, and I let myself grieve, not only for what almost happened to me, but for the daughter I thought I had, the one I would have trusted with my last breath. But I am here, and I am speaking. And that means she did not get to rewrite my ending. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. If something feels wrong, do not silence yourself to keep the peace. Because peace that demands your safety is not peace at all. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means the world to me, and if you want to hear more true stories like this, please subscribe.